up your speakers because today is going to be a noisy one. Echoing through the hills of North Wales, we've brought together 3 modern classics which we think are often overlooked while their even more expensive siblings hog the limelight. In our opinion, they're all good places to put your money in their own right. Whether it's down to their engine, their rarity, or the cult following, we can only see them going one way in time to come. But most importantly for those of us behind the wheel, these cars feature some of the most special, visceral, characterful engines ever put in the front, middle or rear of a motor car. We've even managed to pull together matching specs to make the video as appealing to the eye as it is to the ears. So, without further ado, let's get out onto some of the best roads in the country and give these cars and their engines the celebration they deserve. Now for me, any celebration of great naturally aspirated engines would not be complete without some form of GT3. Today that comes in the form of a 997 Gen 2 GT3RS with the 3.8 litre Metzger flat 6. Now you might say, why no 991, no 992, with those mega engines that rev all the way up to 9,000? Well, that word Metzger is a big reason, because this engine's just legendary. It's probably one of the only engines that has a nickname from the guy who designed it. Those new direct injection engines are mega in their own right. I wouldn't even say they're better or worse, but these Metzgers have this sort of guttural character to them that is basically unmatched. Now, okay, Metzger, you might say, why no 4 litre? That's the ultimate Metzger, right? And yeah, it is. Partially, they're kind of hard to get hold of. But secondly, if you introduce values into the equation, which we are thinking about, a 4 litre would cost you more than double what this would. And what I want to find out, because this is actually my first time in a 3.8, is how close can the 3.8 come to the 4 litre for such a difference in values? So what are we working with? We have 450 horsepower, 430 newton meters of torque, and we've only got 1400 kilos to push around. So it is a quick car actually, especially on a road like this. Pulls from all over really. I mean, out of a slow second gear corner like that, I think the 3.6 would be struggling a little bit there, and this pulls a lot harder from low revs. Now the 4 litre, that's a different kettle of fish again. They are really torquey. But again, think about the value. This isn't far behind. Now the response, unbelievable. I'm more used to driving our 3.6 GT3 with the dual mass flywheel. And this RS has the single mass flywheel, which chunters along at idle, which is quite cool. But it means it revs so quickly. I was just over revving this on the downshifts when I first got into it. In fact, like I pretty much did then, because it revs so quickly. And the noise, obviously the noise, it's that cup car sound. And there's nothing fake about it. There are no fake pops and bangs, nothing piped in through the speakers. It is just a proper engine. And quite importantly, it's mated to a proper gearbox. It's an absolutely awesome 6-speed manual. Really heavy throw. You've got to mean it when you change gear. You pull these bruh sort of faces. It just suits that raw character of the car. And you're on your own. You've got to blip the downshifts yourself. Like I say, sometimes you get it right. Sometimes you rev it a bit high. Obviously that lack of weight helps with the braking as well. This is just on the standard steel discs, but they really hurl it down and I've had no fade. Front end, super sharp. Certainly none of the understeer you hear about at these sort of speeds, and it's a slightly wider track than the 3.6, which probably helps that as well. It is intoxicating. to drive down a road like this, and the engine is a big part of it. And this gearbox to me shows that it isn't just about the engine, because the gearbox is kind of what lets you enjoy the engine. That's how you access it. And this gearbox is such a joy that it makes you use the engine even more. You just change up and down for the sake of it. It just completes the whole experience. This car is one cohesive thing. I say it every time I get in any of these 997 GT3s. Doesn't really matter which one it is, they're all incredible. Yeah, they're just the one. Is the 3.8 the sweet spot? I think it just might be, you know.
Launched at the 2009 Frankfurt Motor Show, the 458 was a big departure from the previous 360 and 430. It was a lot sleeker, and it had a brand spanking new V8 engine with a hell of a lot more power than the 430 had. 458 also was one of the first Ferraris to have the 7-speed semi-automatic dual-clutch gearbox, which gave you an instantaneous change rather than waiting for all these actuators and things. Now I know, yes, okay, you couldn't get these in a manual like you could the 430 and like you can with that 997 RS. Now obviously, we're here because it's the NA Heroes series, and what an engine this is. It's an engine that's so good, it won awards. The 458's engine took the International Engine of the Year award in 2011 and 2012, and then it continued to take it in 2014 and 2015 with a slightly tuned variant that went in the Speciale. And there's little wonder, I mean, it revs so freely, and it sounds like a Ferrari should sound. In terms of performance, well, it's a 4.5 litre V8, so we've got an extra 2 cylinders already over that Porsche that Matt's driving right now, and that also means that you've got 562 brake horsepower and 540 newton meters of torque. And to get that power, you've got to rev it. You've got to have these little lights up on the steering wheel and making that fantastic scream. Now, as Matt said, the 997.2 RS is very much mechanically tuned for handling. And although the 458 has got a brilliant chassis that if you turn all the electronics off, a lot of the work is being done by the electronics to make it feel and drive just the way that it does. It feels safe, but then again it also doesn't. It leads you into this feeling that it is going to try and kill you, but it's probably not. Now, performance-wise, I mean, this blows the Porsche out of the window, to be fair. I mean, top speed 202 miles an hour, and it'll get from 0 to 60 in 3.4 seconds. But whereas with the Porsche, that depends on how good your clutch control is. This just purely depends on pressing this button down here that says launch. Now, I do get the attraction to the RS, with it being more mechanical. You do get that little bit more rawness from it to values. I mean, if people come up to me and say, I've got about 150 grand to spend on a supercar, my instant reaction is Ferrari 458. It does everything that a supercar should do. It looks good, it sounds good, it's fast, it drives well, and on top of that, you're sort of quite safe buying one because values are pretty solid and I can't really see them dropping. It is, barring the Speciale, which unfortunately for most people, they've just gone ballistic already in terms of value. These are still pretty attainable. I just think there's such a good driver's car, and Ferrari will never make another 458. They can't. It's going to have to be hybrided or turboed.
Now we've had the two razor-sharp precision instruments. For me, equally deserving to be in a celebration of naturally aspirated engines is this sledgehammer. The 6.2 litre V8 that Mercedes put in most of its range and clung onto for as long as it possibly could. In this CLK Black Series, it makes 507 brake horsepower, 630 newton meters of torque, so it is a real powerhouse, and it sounds every bit as good as you would think anywhere in the rev range. From 2000 revs, it's just, oh, got this grunt to it. It's so good. And because it has so much torque but no lag, it just absolutely loves to light its rear tyres up at every opportunity. It's just bam, straight to the rear wheels, all that torque, all at once. Now in the Black Series, we've got no rear seats, these carbon door cards and some other bits like these carbon buckets, but nevertheless it is not light. It's over 1700 kilos, so it feels pretty hefty after getting out of the GT3RS, but I have to say, it goes down a road very impressively. You have more weight to manage, but front end's great, the steering has a really nice weight to it actually, which modern AMGs don't. So I wouldn't necessarily say it feels its weight, but it does move around on the road a hell of a lot compared to that RS. It's just a different kind of driving experience. It's this big, lazy grunt. But it does handle, and it does stop as well. Now Adam told me before I got in this that I need to grab it by the scruff of the neck, and actually it really comes alive. So whilst it kind of does have a lazy character for what you might call a track-focused car, he's right actually. It always doesn't feel like what you should be doing, grabbing a big car like this by the scruff. But it works. Now, one thing that doesn't work so well, bit of an elephant in the room, is the gearbox. Now at the time, it was actually quite a big deal because Mercedes had just moved on from the ancient old 5-speed and put this 7-speed in. But what I found through driving it for a bit longer, and this is really strange to say, is you can almost heel and toe an automatic. If you flip the throttle at the same time as hitting the downshift, you do get that little rev that you want. It's not an exact science, but it certainly adds to the experience. Now luckily, what it lacks in gearbox, it just makes up for it. Power. If it doesn't give you the shift and you're coming out of a bend at 2,000-3,000 revs, so what? It just pulls. I do stand by what I said in the Porsche, that the gearbox is how you interact with an engine, and in that, it really lets you do it. And in the 458 with that razor sharp double clutch, it enhances the engine. This limits your interaction with it. But as I say, it has so much power and so much character, it certainly doesn't ruin it. One thing that's actually quite strange about it is the driving position. So it must be from them fitting the buckets in a car that wasn't really supposed to have buckets. My feet are over here, the steering wheel's sort of over here. You can tell in other ways the CLK was never really meant to be a performance car. I mean, the clock in the dials is as big as the rev counter. As I say, that, you know, AMG of this era was just like, don't care, power. And where I said, yeah, the Porsche has one of the best engines of all time, but it's a whole package. Don't get me wrong, this drives well, but it's just all engine. You can't do anything but focus on that engine. And I think that shows how good this engine is. I'm not sure people would necessarily remember this car as fondly as they do without that motor, but because of it, everyone loves it. Now, it's a rare car as well. believe there are only about 500 right-hand drive cars. Only about 125 of those came to the UK, so it's not often you see them come up for sale. So it's kind of hard to talk about values, but it's hard to see them ever dropping with that level of rarity. And interestingly, a CLK DTM a few years ago was about 170 grand. Now they're about 400, this car's bigger brother. And I have driven one of those. It's quite a spectacular beast in a different sort of way with the supercharged V8. But the gearbox in that is even worse. So I think over a road, I actually enjoy driving this more than a DTM for a fraction of the price. What I would say about this car is it's possibly an acquired taste. And yeah, it's not a precision instrument, but it's like the definition of a sledgehammer, and it is so thrilling because of it. Well, our ears were ringing after a day of driving these around, and that's what you want from cars like these, isn't it? These three can sometimes be overlooked in favour of the top dogs of their respective ranges, the RS 4 litre, 458 Speciale and the SLS Black Series. But here you still get almost the same magical engines for a fraction of the price. All three of our contenders are the last of their kind in one way or another. All would fetch in the region of £150,000, and whilst they might not keep your pockets happy at the petrol pumps, we think all three will see you well from an investment standpoint over time. Just to clarify, we're not anti-turbo or even anti-hybrid, but we're all about character, and that is why these cars and their engines are so great. They're very different characters too, and if we're being greedy, they make a great three-car garage. The unapologetically raw GT3RS for your back-to-basics, flat-out driving, the super lively 458 for touring the Alps, and the cliché sledgehammer Black Series to satisfy that inner hooligan. The one thing all three do have in common is that they're oozing with soul, and that is because of those incredible engines. Let us know which one you would take in the comments below, and get your suggestions in for which special engines you want us to cover next.